Welcome to Net Impact, the podcast that demystifies and explores the influence of cybersecurity and cybercrime across the world and into our lives. Brought to you by ThriveDX, the global leader in cybersecurity training. Here's your host and guide to the digital world, Fred Menachem.
Hey everyone, can you believe we're already at episode 4 of Net Impact? We've had some amazing guests, as folks have seen already, and today is no different. I am so excited to have the pleasure of introducing Bindi Davé, who's now currently the Deputy CISO at DigiCert. Now, Bindi's life and career has taken her all over, from Kenya to Illinois to the San Francisco Bay and places in between. So I've had the chance to spend time with her, so I've really gotten to feel like I've gotten to know her a bit, but her path into cybersecurity has been unconventional in a sense, and her career has been as well. So, she's effervescent, she's nuanced, she's out of the box, dynamic, and I've already learned so much about her, as I said in her previous conversation. So now, without further ado, I'm excited to have you on the show. So what up, Bindi Davé?
What up? What up? Thanks for that awesome introduction, Fred. I feel honored to be here.
Well, I'm honored to have you. So if we can start with the cookie cutter stuff. So, yeah, and you're definitely not cookie cutter, by the way, but tell us, your name, rank, serial number, and just all that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So Bindi Davé, name, that's the name part of it. Rank Deputy CISO at DigiCert. I've been at this role for about a year. Previous to DigiCert, I was the head of global enterprise security at GoDaddy and the head of security for a smaller ad tech firm before joining DigiCert. I'd been aware of DigiCert through the industry for a number of years, and I'm super excited to be a part of this unique organization that not only helps set industry standards for what security means at large, but also provides customers with digital trust solutions that in an age where we're seeing this trust crescendo, right? Where, hey, let's trust everything. We have to be able to stay up with the modernizing and digitizing world, but how do we also thwart against attackers and inoculate ourselves from a hygiene perspective? And a lot of the conversations that I hear from my peers in the cybersecurity industry, I get to be in a unique position of not only also experiencing them myself and coming up with creative solutions to ensure that our customers and our products stay safe, but looking at the industry at large and seeing how we can set better requirements and compliance standards in order to uplift all of us together. So yeah, it's a little bit about what I do here, but as you mentioned, the cookie cutter stuff, my journey wasn't super straightforward. So I went to school, I did my undergrad in finance just outside of Chicago. And I remember basically the only thing I had going for me was that I graduated early. And so I had, when the markets were collapsing and you didn't want to be in finance at the time, right? And I remember coming home to my dad and I said, Dad, I got the best job offer. I am out of here. I'm going to London. And he's like, oh yeah, what's this job offer? I'm like, it's a contract gig. That'll be great. I'll get more money in my pocket, but I'm going to travel the world and, implement DVD players and headrests. And he goes, what else you got? So the other job offer was as a project manager at a smaller cybersecurity consulting company that really worked on PCI, payment card industry, data security standard audits and writing policies and doing vulnerability assessments and pen tests. So really got to wear a lot of different hats there, from writing policies to consulting on compliance efforts to collating paper when the printer broke, and try my hand at different areas of cybersecurity. Yeah, so through that, I've always had a love for the passion for law. And at one point I wanted to go and get my JD But I figured, compliance requirements are pretty close to that. I didn't want to stray too far away from the technical side. So I stayed in the project management, program management. I've worked both in-house and in consulting capacities. So got a chance to work on a lot of different verticals. And through that, I've seen some common themes in our industry around, challenges that we as security professionals face, but also and what makes a well-rounded security professional. And for folks that are trying to get into this industry, we may not realize that there's so many other, career trajectories that have transferable skill sets that cybersecurity can utilize. So just thinking outside of the box and having some great mentors along the way now brings me here to DigiCert.
So who are some of your mentors, by the way?
Yeah, so early on, I worked for that cybersecurity consulting company, and Ryan Bentley, Ryan, if he's going to watch this, shout out to you. He was the one who first taught me how to run a vulnerability scan and how to effectively use Visio in communicating workflows. And everything in between, right? So how an organization really looks at what they need to establish for their security program. And that was a really interesting time coming from a business background, but jumping into more technical sides. And then cybersecurity, like I didn't know what that was, right? You hear about engineers, you hear about developers, but there's really jobs to try to break this stuff and then try to prevent other people from breaking it. Like that's really cool. And then as my career progressed, other folks that I've worked with, I've had more formalized executive coaching as well. But each person that I've come across, whether it's from a conference or, our RSA conferences and Black Hat to just working and meeting folks in relationships like this, there's pieces to glean and help form the person that I am today.
Sure. And so, you were talking momentarily about, the DVD job, which by the way, if I was, it does sound fun, right? But
right?
No, it does. Come on. Your dad was like, no way, right? You're close to your parents. Of course, we talked about that. So
yeah,
and they weren't necessarily wrong, but it sounds like could have been a fun job.
I mean, full-time job versus
right.
a contracting position,
Yeah,
right? I think I would guide my younger self the same thing.
and by the way, the DVDs kind of went out, so you probably chose the right thing. So really, yeah, that wouldn't have lasted too long anyhow. But all joking aside, I mean, really, and I got to know you a bit, and I wish that we could spend hours talking, but that job, you walked into that job, I mean, not really knowing anything about what the heck cyber was, right? I mean, and it sort of changed the trajectory of your life. You want to talk about that a bit? I mean, in many ways, right?
Yeah. What's interesting is like, when we were chatting previously, I shared that like my brain works in workflows and thinks in workflows. So when you talk about, in that consulting aspect and coming into cybersecurity, I remember one of my first projects were around getting a almost project management system implemented, so that designed and implemented so that when we took a customer and said, hey, we're doing our scoping efforts till we have a statement of work created, till we're doing the policy and review phase of the overall engagement, and now we're doing the gap assessment, whatever phase we were in the overall effort, how do you manage that with 75 plus customers at any given time and ensure that, their deadlines are being met and their remediation timelines are addressed, because the stakes are high. I mean, I'm a firm believer that if you do security well, more often than not, you'll achieve a lot of your compliance requirements. Many organizations take the flip of that and say that their security strategy is going to be for whatever their compliance requirements are. And there are considerable fines, right, if you don't meet certain deadlines. And achieve what those requirements are. So being able to understand those compliance pieces from the payment card industry perspective, or healthcare information from HIPAA, or whatever, that working backwards to say, you're scoped in this area, how are your systems protected? Then being able to further shift left and say, why do we need to do what we're doing and how do we go about doing it, really helped change not only how I view security, but how I address complex problems in a leadership capacity today.
But no, you're talking about workflows and right, you manage a lot of folks now, correct?
Yeah, so it was interesting. At GoDaddy, I joined and started with a team of about 5 and ended with roughly about 70 leading the enterprise security charge. And what is that? That encapsulates quite a few things, right? So you think of a traditionally security organization, you're saying, oh, we have our SOC, or a security operations center, that's going to review detections, and you're going to have your incident response functions, security engineering, your vulnerability management, your identity and access management, your governance, all these pillars, so to speak, but finding the interconnectedness between those and translating all of those words into a lens that the business can understand and prioritize has really been my jam.
So speaking of your jam, because I know there's something else that's your jam, is
Oh,
well, I think so. At least from when we spoke very, we spoke pretty thoroughly and about sort of some of the things that are missing when it comes to management at times, right? And those soft skills. You know, tell me about that because you've managed a lot of people, right? And soft skills tend to, a lot of folks aren't necessarily very good at those. So how do you see that and sort of you've done? I mean, how have you
yeah.
put that into practice?
Yeah, I think, I'm a firm believer that I don't think anyone starts their day and says, I'm going to do a bad job today. Like, I'm going to bring my worst, right? So each person is unique. We're all snowflakes in our own right. Earlier, you said that you're working on just how, interrupting and delivery mechanisms. It's important for me to understand that so I can support that um, thing that you're working on, right? And so it's kind of how it works across teams. Now, I've seen a lot of organizations, they find a resource that's really good technically, and say, hey, you're awesome at Linux, whatever. We're going to have you manage a team of people. And what companies are entrusting when they put folks in leadership positions is being able to amplify what they're bringing to the table across those other folks, right? But one of the key things that I've found through my career is that we have to have a brand of empowerment when we talk about leadership, and not just empowering the leaders, but our folks that we're leading, right? So hire the right folks for the team, maybe not necessarily for the defined job that you have, but empower them to be able to make the decisions, anchor the why and the what that we're working on, but give them the flexibility to come up with how they come to that conclusion or that success criteria or acceptance criteria. And I think we start to see a shift in how teams operate together and how people feel valued in their contributions for, that one task that they're doing on June 23rd. And now that has an impact at something that rolls up to the board level or helps the organization achieve its overall goals. So leadership should bring that transparency, but also understand what makes people tick and what their individual goals are and provide opportunities to support them. In my humble opinion, and contrary to me just giving all of that out right now, is we
Yeah.
should be listeners, as opposed to active talkers, because, I mean, how else are you going to hear everyone's ideas?
Of course, 100%. Oddly though, as much as I talk, I'm actively listening at the same time. It's a very strange skill. But you're right, and I think that all joking aside, again, I want to just go a little bit further on this because I can talk about life experience. Right, I'm older. I've had worked in many a world, media, politics, etc. And so I've seen a lot of different styles. And one thing I've noticed, I mean, I think I'm innately this way, but kindness and empathy are so
Yeah.
important in the workplace. And I will say that I've seen for years and years, you have a lot of philosophies. People, I don't know, I sometimes think people watch House of Cards and they believe that the world should operate that way. And I'm serious when I say that. No, but you get my point. I'm exaggerating, but
Yeah.
I think that there's and I hear this, and this is at least from my impression that I have always worked, fortunately, generally with very kind, amazing human beings, whether it was in politics or media. And I found that because of that, I was able to be phenomenally successful, right? Because of what you just spoke about. Understanding the person, right? You said, oh, if
Right.
somebody interrupts, you have to, but it's true because that's empathy and that's understanding we're not all the same. So
And
I
that's
think kind,
great,
right? But
right?
I think we don't focus enough in the workplace in general on kindness and
Yeah.
empathy. And I think that a manager, because I think, and I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like I've learned a lot about you. We spend a lot of time speaking. You're a very kind and empathetic person, but at the same time, you're process oriented, right? And you're, when it comes to work, but you're also, and so my point in saying that, and I don't want to speak for you, is that you can be both and make sure people are doing their job but also also really get to know them and understand how they work and be kind. And if some so why don't you want to elaborate on that for a second as
Yeah.
my
You're spot on though. Kindness is something that's like so incredibly important, but so overlooked. And I'm so glad that you raised that. We don't know what's going on in anyone's day or in anyone's lives, right? Like, I can't, it's not a fair assumption for me to say, hey, you missed doing your task because you just didn't want to do it. So having that open mindedness to have that conversation, but I also like leaning on data and metrics and trends and having that visibility. It comes both ways, right? Have the discussions, understand your team members, keep an open heart. I think all too often we say keep an open mind, and yes, that's true too. But our hearts are also connected when you talk about
I,
bringing your whole self to work. Um, and then also the metrics behind it.
right, but of course, but you're, and I want to go move back again to where I was,
Yeah.
but I want to say this. Look, you're preaching to the choir, and I believe that vulnerability, you want to maintain a level of professionalism, but at the same time, we all are like, I struggle with anxiety, for example, right? We're vulnerable people, and just what you said, to tap into and understand where other people are coming from, whether they tell you or you can just be empathetic enough to understand or perceptive. I think it's so important not to be afraid to be vulnerable. And I think so many people are so afraid, but the reality is this: I'm very vulnerable and open about it. And I feel like so many people are struggling with anything. And you want a great employee, you want people to do well, well, then don't be afraid to be vulnerable with them, because when you're vulnerable with another human being in the workplace, there's like shocked, right? That, oh my God, this person also goes through stuff. So I want to well, go ahead,
Yeah.
sure, please.
It humanizes you,
Yeah,
right? Like, I mean, people are going to sniff out when you're, BSing them or faking it.
of
As
course.
leaders, it is a strength to say, I don't know this. I'm not the SME in this, but surround yourself with folks that have that depth. And that's what makes an excellent team. If everyone had the same skill sets, then how do you diversify that portfolio? And being open about where your strengths are not, I think brings a level of respect and understanding. And, you know, I, I have a lot to learn still, and I think that learning will go as long as I'm breathing. But one of those key things that I've learned and why I do have such a strong network and folks that will go from company to company with me is because we have an understanding that it's deliverable based. We respect each other, we're honest, right? And whatever's going on in your personal lives, at the end of the day, this is a job and we will get to it, but we don't have to trample over people in order to do it. There's enough space for everyone. We can be human about it.
1,000%. And I will say this, and we'll move on to the next question. But you're talking about people that follow you, right? Or people that you continue that you work together, right? The people you've been in other places, and I have to say that throughout my life, I've been very fortunate that no matter what job I've been at, whether we end up working together in the future or not, that I have consistently remained close with people I've worked for 30 years ago or worked with. And I think that says a lot about, you, Bindi, because if people want to, I know that you have a side that not tough necessarily, but you have your metrics, but you're a kind, empathetic human being. And I think that certainly if I was in, cybersecurity, I certainly would be happy to follow you. You probably get me into shape, in a sense. No, really. And I say that, genuinely. I think that you are somebody that is very nuanced in a positive way. And you can, and we're going to talk about that, you have both sides, you're focused and you're in touch with your emotive, your emotive side. So anyhow, now we're getting on that, but I did want to move on to tech stuff. You did, once we got a little bit off tangent, but I think that was great, by the way. And I think that's an important conversation. We were talking about cyber skills, and you said that there was a lot of tracks in the field, right? A lot of tracks that people, and I think, look, when I started, in this field, I knew nothing about cyber, right? And I learned, and I thought it's technical now. Certainly it's technical for hackers and all of that, but how would you explain to folks, watching or listening about that this field is open to them if they don't have a technical background? And I think that makes sense coming from you.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it goes back to that human aspect and showing those vulnerabilities, but having an understanding of what needs to get done, right? And in that flexibility. So brass tacks, you can have a business without cybersecurity, but you can't have cybersecurity without a business. Okay. If you start from that foundation and say, this is all based on risk to the organization of what we need to do. The days of security members coming in and saying, thou shalt not pass, or you will not, move forward and take production traffic, blah, 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 should be tempered with being reasonable for what the business needs. We're not, my brand for cybersecurity, or at least how I guide my teams and operate in the workplace, is that cybersecurity is not the no champion. We're yes. Any business area that wants to do what they need to do and deliver their mission and their charters, cybersecurity shouldn't be in a position to say, no, you can't do this. No, yeah, let's do it. Let's figure out a way to safely do it. Do you need a test account? Are we using service accounts? How are we authenticating? Like, we can go through a set criteria to evaluate the business risk and then determine the mitigations based off of that. So you don't have to be deeply technical in order to review a lot of those things, but you do need an understanding of what is your organization or what is the business about, what are its priorities and what are its risk thresholds, but also how do you rally people together? More often than not, right, you have your product team that sets your product features and whatever the organization is going to deliver, and engineering is going to create, and it sets the priorities, and you have your marketing function and your sales and your revenue generating areas of the business. When you look at cybersecurity, we should think about it like a platform, or like an area of the business that's not a vertical, but actually a horizontal, and supports each of those other business units. And with that, they need folks of all different skill sets. Coming back to the softer skills, how do we bring someone from sales, from marketing, from product, from engineering together to come up with a solution that helps the business at large, right? And it's not working in silos that says, oh, security did a pen test, here's a finding, go figure out how to address it. Bringing those partnerships together, I think, is the beginning of a beautiful conversation in how you can bring different skill sets, technical or not, into a cybersecurity domain area to help the business accomplish what it needs to.
So you spoke earlier about, and you did mention it for a moment about hygiene management, right? And so there's been a lot of hacks, right? I mean, there's always a lot of hacks, and I think a lot of folks don't realize, you know, they miss it sometimes, and so we just, I mean, every day, right? Bindi, there's healthcare, there's, you know, we saw this car dealership hack, the software. I mean, you know, it's incredible to watch. I made a phone call to a car dealership for a friend, and I just kind of not for fun, but I was curious at the response. And I said, "Oh, my friend's car's been stuck there. Can't seem to get it. Is there something going on?" And they're like, "Oh, well, you know, there's a software problem." I said, "Okay, so what is he supposed to do?" I said, "Can I speak with the GM?" And I said, "Well, you know, what can I do?" He's like, "Oh, just come in. We'll have to use the old pen and paper." And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, "But that's my point being is that, you know, that's a car dealership talking about affecting the economy. You're talking about the ability to, for foreign countries, and I want to go too far into this because there's so much more I want to talk about, but for foreign countries to hack into water systems or, you know, bad actors, I say foreign countries, you know, adversaries, whatever you want to
State
call them.
actors.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't want to say Iran, for example. I mean, you know, they tried to hack into a water system here in was it Pennsylvania? I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I believe so. Etc. So the point is that cyber impacts all of us. But I know. So what did you wanted to? I know you wanted to talk about inoculating ourselves and hygiene management and the trust crescendo. So
Yeah. You know, we this industry is interesting because you're right. We're constantly hearing about these different hacks and these different compromises and breaches, right? But we're not like talking enough about what we do about it in a simple way, coming back to the basics. So, all day long, you'll hear about vulnerabilities. Right? We just talked about vulnerabilities being
right,
a good thing on the human
right,
side. When you talk about a server, for example, having OS level vulnerabilities, that vulnerability is a weakness in that system. So when you think logically, you have all these cybersecurity frameworks, right? Say NIST, which is what the National Institute of Standards and Technologies. There's these resources, but how do you bring the resources into practice into your organization? Let's take that server example. NIST says that the first step of building these programs is identify. It's one of the functional areas. And our job as security professionals, again, in order to be able to understand where that cyber risk resides and how we inoculate ourselves, because these breaches, these attacks are going to happen. It's not an if, it's a when. So what we're trying to
right,
do is just make it more complicated, right? You know, for the threat actor, if we have a big neon sign with our password that says, here's the password and here is a roadmap to get to our company crown jewels, that makes it pretty easy. I think any attacker would go, hey, that's going to be low hanging fruit. Let's get after them. So how do we make that more complicated? And, you know, do you use passwords? Do you have multi-factor authentication? Do you know about all of your servers? Do you have missing patch management running? Are you automating a lot of these pipelines? And that's what your cybersecurity team should help you do so that later when you have your various compliance requirements that says, hey, do you have an asset inventory? Absolutely, I do. And my cybersecurity team has helped develop automated systems of getting there. But so there's this concept, Fred, called the golden triangle, right? And it is your people, your processes, and your technologies. Do you know about all of those things? Is all of your humans, all of your processes, all of your technologies, and what protections do you have against those assets from whatever those risks could affect them? And what are you doing about it should a breach or one of those things happen? One of the first things that I think security professionals need to look at is how much our systems are trusting each other. Um, you'll hear my CEO speak about this trust crescendo, where everyone's trying to move faster. We're trying to get to market with features faster, right? Speed and efficiency. And sometimes security can slow things down because you're asking for different ways of doing stuff. You don't want to hard code a secret. You have to go have it pulled from a credential manager. Well, that's an extra step. But being able to say, okay, we trust these identities, but how do we also verify that what we're trusting is accurate? How do we know that that person that called you asking for your credit card number is actually the person from the automotive store that needs it for whatever part and isn't someone just trying to steal your information, right? How do you verify that? And that's where I think DigiCert is in a really cool spot, because not only does it provide businesses the ability to trust digital identities, but then also manage the life cycle of those, which is something that's becoming increasingly more and more important as we try to inoculate ourselves from these bad actors. So I know that was a mouthful.
No, that's okay. Believe me, I like it. You have a
Comes
lot of
full circle.
you have a lot of great things to say. I'm doing a good job, right? I'm not interrupting, right? I'm pretty proud of myself. I know. I'm not messing with Bindi Davé. No, really, this is good practice for me. I have to, but all joking aside, that's how we learn, right? That's how we learn from each other by we have to practice, right? I mean,
so what did you think when they said that you had to go to the paper and pen route at the car dealership? What was your initial thought?
I mean, you want to know? Well, my initial thought, actually, I shouldn't say it. I actually said it out loud. I was like, so that means I could send people over and we can just steal all the cars and nobody would ever know. And I said it joking, but not joking, because when think about the economic, I mean, there's so many, we could talk all day, and I know there's so many other things I want to get to, but think about what I thought. I was like, oh my God. I was like, literally, I wasn't surprised because I understand this world. I was like, literally, somebody can go right now and they could just steal all the cars, and literally they have no way to track them at the moment. They don't even have, let's be realistic, they don't even have that stuff on paper anymore. They might have like sale. So literally somebody could just talk about a disaster to an economy, even car dealerships. So that's what I thought. I maybe have a criminal mind. I don't know, but but all joking aside. And I thought that, like, what did you think? What do you think?
But that's exactly it,
I mean,
right? Like,
insane.
they're tracking orders, they're generating shipping manifests, they're whatever. Hey, I want this, new Range Rover delivered to me. What's to stop? Like, how do we, and that's where that trust comes in, right? How do we know that you're actually receive the recipient as intended?
And listen, I always believe, and we see this in elections and stuff, you need a paper backup on some level. Right, you need some backup that's not on a computer. I love that. I don't know, I know a lot of stuff, but the mafia, the guys in the mafia in the old days, they used to do, before computers, but anyway, there were other ways to keep systems, but they only had one guy who kept the numbers in his pocket. You didn't know who he was, like odd guy sitting on the beach, and he always had the numbers, so if there was ever the feds coming to arrest them, nobody knew where the numbers were. So I mean, that's I don't know where I came up with that analogy, but my point being is that, right? But think about it, right? We have all this stuff in computers, but you got to have something on paper. You have to have a backup as well. I mean, is that correct? Am I wrong? Sometimes going back to the old ways, as you have technology, but also,
those hard, like, you see some of the requirements say that, some root keys are kept in fire retardant safes, and they're in heavily protected physical locations, because it's based on the importance of that information to the business. And if that gets compromised, what's the impact to the reputation of that organization? I can tell you, as a CA or a certificate authority, there's very little room for error in that. And so we have to take that extremely seriously in how we protect our company crown jewels.
Yeah, it's incredible and personal. So let me shift a bit, and I want to get a little bit more personal. Don't worry, just a little. But all joking aside, no, I'm being funny.
I love it, Fred.
But I do. I know. What can I tell you? But I wanted to talk a bit about. We talked about anxiety, right? We talked about having other hobbies. We talked about burnout. We actually talked about a lot of things. And I know, like I said earlier, I struggle with anxiety, for example, and I am not as good as you are at managing it. And you have found many ways, and I think, we grew up in probably in some ways very similar families. Like, for example, you're always working right through high school. You weren't like the other kids. You weren't out partying, right? Good work ethic. Tell us about that for a minute.
Yeah, so I grew up in a more traditional conservative Indian household, and my parents migrated here. So I was born in Africa and in Kenya. My younger brother was born in India. My parents migrated here. Oh, I want to say I was about 4 years old. And so when they were in Africa, my grandparents were school teachers and bringing education to villages. And my dad has been in business. My parents are serial entrepreneurs, but I've seen the lifestyle of growing up comfortable and then coming to another country with literally just the clothes on your back and having to rebuild everything that they have to where they are today. And I think it's a blessing being able to see both sides of that, to give some of that work rigor. Um, I mean, growing up, I worked as my parents used to flip motels. And I was between making the beds to managing inventories to checking out rooms. Um, all through college, I helped my mom set up a day spa. And so I have my cosmetology license and I did hair. And that helped me get through college and ended up starting two businesses. About halfway, I don't want to say halfway, but earlier in my career, when I was in cybersecurity now full time, I burnt out pretty badly. There were some pretty large incidents that I was handling, and I realized that I've just been go, go, go for as long as I can remember. And I didn't have the tool sets to say, how do I breathe? How do I make sure that the work doesn't define me? But the work is just a product of what I deliver, not me myself. And so I left corporate everything, and I was living in the Bay Area at the time and got certified in our yoga. So RYT 500, prenatal, postnatal, children's yoga. And that really helped me get a better perspective on me, right? And how I handle stress and how I handle vulnerability and how others around me can handle me when I am stressed. It was really important though. And I think without taking that pause and taking that time to learn about myself and that reflection, I don't think that I would be as successful as I am today, because right, it would be like throwing a rock in a pond, and you never know how far those ripples can actually go, and not only your personal health but those around you.
And I think, I grew up I think we talked about this in similar, not necessarily first generation immigrant, but similar circumstances with parents that wanted us to be expected a lot out of us, very high bar, amazing people. I love my family. I mean, my father unfortunately passed away when I was young, but also at the same time, you told a story, and I actually didn't tell you this at the time, but I've been meaning to tell you because I thought about it after we spoke. So when I was growing up, and I know you'll relate to this, we had to be active, right? Like, you could be dying unless you're dead. Why didn't you work? Why are you at school? Right? It was like, what the heck?
Why are you sitting on the couch watching TV?
Right, like that would, right. I could save the world like 4 days, for 4 days and sitting on the couch, forget it. You're like, oh, horrible. I'm being
lazy.
But, oh my God, terrible. So when I was in high school, like taking naps, I still can't take a nap hardly. That was like forbidden sort of. So I read a lot. I was a voracious reader. So I would lay on the bed and back then, we didn't have locks. I don't know, crazy. Parents wouldn't let us have locks at our doors. I don't know, it was maybe different generation. So always nervous somebody was going to come in. So I'd lay on the bed trying to take a nap with a book on my stomach. And if my mother or somebody came in, I would jump, to read the book. And I tell that story because I think, I don't want to tell your story, but we kind of talked about that. I think that you sort of, grew up in a similar way. And I think that lends sometimes to, I'm so happy about the way I grew up, but sometimes that creates an anxiety. a level of anxiety. So you talk about burnout, but you're a very creative person. I mean, besides yoga, right? You have a lot of outlets, correct?
Yeah, it's actually funny. We had a similar policy of no locking the doors in the house.
Oh,
And
really?
when I was younger, though, that was like my big thing. I would want to just go into my room and lock the door, to the point where one day my dad actually took the door off. It was like,
Wow,
you won't have anything to lock. So,
that's
yeah, I empathize with that. But I went to culinary school. Food is an outlet for me. I
oh, that's
love
right.
eating. I love cooking, art, right? I find a way to let my creative side help balance some of the more process driven technical aspects that I have to deal with every day. And I think life is about balance. And that's what yoga and breathing exercises and what we're talking about here teaches us, is that, I won't get too much into the concept of nature versus nurture. But no, burnout is real, especially when we see organizations that are going through layoffs. And what does that mean for our internal team members, especially when you lose a lot of that historical knowledge inside of your organization, and then you feel like you have to do everything to keep the team going. And I love that integrity that folks bring, but we have to prioritize our mental health and our team's mental health. And taking breaks is okay, and being, treating ourselves with grace is okay. If you can't get the solution to that problem, then take a break, walk away, eat a snack, take a nap, pet a dog, any dog, whatever.
And you said a
But
headstand earlier, right?
I
You said,
did,
right.
yeah,
You do
that's a
headstands.
quite
You're not
literal
joking, though,
way.
right? You told me
No,
that, right?
absolutely. You want to change your perspective. What quick, literal way to do that, as opposed to pop into a headstand. And you'll see that what's up isn't really up, and what's
Right.
down is around. So,
Healthy choices, right? Like instead of, I
healthy
mean, there's other,
choices.
right? I mean, a headstand's, pretty healthy. And I will say on that note, you were talking about, our mental health and all of that. And I think, leading back to what we were talking about earlier, as, working together with other folks, whether you're managing them, whether they're your colleagues, I think that, I can tell you from experience, I've had my own struggles, depression, anxiety, I'm not ashamed of it. And I have been very fortunate, because in my day, it wasn't something that you spoke about, except that I did. And I had a lot of people in my life over the years, that in workplaces, wherever, that really were supportive. And I have to tell you something, for
Right.
me, that was so amazing, because there's a huge difference when when you're able to share that and communicate it, at work. And I think that I think things are, Bindi, you can tell me, I'm a bit older, so I try to understand what's happening with the younger generations, but it seems like people are more open today about mental health in the workplace. And it seems that, at least from the outside looking in, but is that really accurate?
I
I
think it
mean,
comes back to the kindness, right? Is every person is going through something. Now, as leaders, do we walk a fine line where we have to respect the person's, personal health information and not pry information, because we also don't want to make someone feel pressured that they have to tell you what's going on in their personal lives, especially if they report directly to you. Yes, there's a fine line that leaders need to be cognizant of, because on the other side of it, Fred, if you were on my team and say I was your manager, and I asked you, hey, your performance has been decreasing, what's going on in your personal life? That could
wow,
be an
that's
intrusive
right. No,
question,
of
right?
course, of course.
So, but making sure that we're leading with kindness, and that openness is there, and you're creating a culture of safety, that whether it's cybersecurity or whatever domain we're talking about, at the end of the day, it's humans. And I love that you have had that feeling of feeling supported. I've had leaders from both sides, ones that wanted to stay as far away from the HR conversations as possible, and others that wanted to dive a little bit deeper. And I think at the end of it, what I try to do to make sure my team members feel comfortable is I don't want to get too deep into it, but we work in sprints. And when we measure it based off of velocity. So for example, if I see that, Fred, every 2 weeks you're delivering 30 velocity points, and then all of a sudden in another sprint, you don't have any time off planned, but now you're only delivering 10 points, then that's a conversation starter for me to say, what can I do to help you? And I keep that focus on what I can control and make sure that I have a pulse on that burnout of my team members so that there's a safe and respectful face.
And now look, that's the difference. I'm sorry. That's the difference between a good leader and a poor leader. And, you know, sometimes I think a poor leader can become a better leader, but you mentioned a couple things. You mentioned about, you know, there's a line. You're not going to ask somebody, you don't want to be intrusive, right? Their personal life. But I think that, and I certainly think that you possess this, and I certainly, you know, I hope that I do. I feel like I do, is that you can sometimes understand without somebody telling you something, right? You know, there's something going on, so you can be empathetic. You don't need to know everybody's details to know that they might need, you know, a little more support and all of that. And I think that's where the human factor comes in. And I think my point is I can tell you from my own experience. I mean, I think, and also look, I've been in experiences when there's people that don't understand that and say very,
we just want to gossip and like,
but it's like they live in, you know, you get that they don't understand it. They to a point where they think it's a weak, you know, all of that BS where really, you know, people are covering up their own stuff. But I used to be in such fear of, I would tell somebody, now I don't care, because I literally don't care. I have nothing. I've had a career, long time, high level, like I don't have anything to lose. I mean, we all have something to lose, but you get it. I don't, you know, I am who I am, 52 years old. Exactly. Yeah. And so I think it is really important. And I think, you know, we're talking cyber, but this is all part of cybersecurity and life. You know, we're managers, we're colleagues, and this is an important conversation, I think. And so I'm glad that you understand that. And I think that's what makes you so good at what you do. And by the way, you did mention something about if you were my manager, you never would be able to handle being my manager. Very few people can actually probably do that, but I don't know how that would work out. But I appreciate that you would be kind. You'd be, well, I mean, look, you know, my friends always say this. They're like, Fred, they're like, you push us to the edge, but then you pull us back in.
You know, there's a fine line between management and leadership, and I really love the leaders that come in with the concept that, like, we're all adults in the workplace. Get your stuff done. Leaders should be able to define what the success criteria is and guide the teams to do it in a collaborative way, right? So do you need hierarchy for chaos? Sure. Do you value everyone's opinion? Yes. But are there tools and techniques that folks can use to make sure that if they do have a, you know, challenging team member, they're still bringing something important to the table? So put them in the right seat to do that.
And that's such an important point, putting people in the right seat. And how many times in your career have you seen that somebody is phenomenally talented, but they're in the wrong seat? And it's not their fault, right? It's the fault of the leadership for putting them in that place. But, and we put, I think often this happens in life, and it's not always purposely, we put people in the wrong seat, and then we make them feel like they're failures when they have phenomenal gifts. And so, I mean, am I right or wrong? I mean, you see that all the time, right?
I've seen that quite a bit. Yeah. Going back to the example of taking really great technical folks and expecting them to be people leaders without resources, right? And that's where I think that vulnerability comes back in, where it's okay to say, hey, I tried this. It didn't work. I need to iterate. I need to try something else. Just do it fast and do it often. Failure isn't a bad thing. Failure is how we learn, right? Just trying to stick to your original idea and not leveraging the outcomes and not changing your mind is probably what's more harmful.
Agree. So, you know, there's so much we could talk about. I didn't get to everything, but there's a couple more things I want to get to. I wanted to talk with you a bit about, there's certainly a lack of diversity in cyber, not because I think, and not because anybody's keeping people out. I think it just originally it was very male dominated, right? Industry at one point. And I think a lot of folks didn't know about it. I think that it's, and you can tell me more than, but I feel like it's starting to get more diverse, right? Slowly, slowly. And you had told me some funny stories about, and I'm not going to give them away because you can tell any story you want, but I'm just saying there were some funny stories and some interesting stories that were more poignant, not all funny. There was one about when you had started, working in the industry, like, surrounded by a bunch of men. There was another one about RSA.
So throughout my career, I've come across lots of different situations. Being a minority female in a very, the industry is shifting, but it's not there yet. And one of the things that I keep in mind is that folks are learning also. And so we have to temper our characterizations and expectations. At RSA, an example was we were at one of the happy hours, and a woman from a fund came up to me and asked me what I was selling. And I was very confused by that. I'm like, sure, I guess we're all selling something in these networking events. But when I asked for more information, she was like, oh, well, aren't you in sales? And I'm like, well, I guess I do work at an excellent product security company where we deliver digital trust solutions, but I'm the deputy CISO and handle the security program. And her response back was, something that we're still facing right now is that, oh, we don't expect people that look and sound like you to be in these positions. And
what does that even mean, right?
I don't know. I take it as I can only control how I take those types of comments, right? And there I'll say, okay, it's flattery, I suppose, but I guess is there more diversity? Sure, right? But should we really be looking at it based off of merit and what folks have accomplished and skills that are needed for whatever specific position is at that organization? Yes, as opposed to maybe some other metrics companies may use that I may not be aware of.
Well, there is so much I wanted to get to. I am so disappointed because I'm not disappointed. We didn't get to everything, but
we'll have to do this again.
We're definitely gonna do this again. How did I do, by the way? Was I pretty good? Did I stay
A plus, Fred?
Thank you.
Very, very well done.
I appreciate that. So before we go, Bindi, what's your favorite book? Just quickly, favorite book.
Oh, you know what? Oh gosh, that'll never work.
Okay, that's fine.
It's the story of Netflix. You should. Oh no, I'm not. That's the name of the book. Not.
I was like, okay. Oh my God, I asked the wrong question. Oh, okay. The story of Netflix. All right.
Yeah, the story of Netflix. Check it out. Who wrote it? It's called "That'll Never Work" by Mark Randolph.
Okay, I'll check it. I love to read voraciously.
Yeah, so. It's a really good one, and I think it goes for our industry and just life as a whole, right? Is just stick to whatever you want to accomplish, and the more no's you hear, you're probably onto something. So don't let it deter you.
So if you can say, if I give you 30 seconds, just not putting you on the spot, maybe a little, just like, what's your theme? What do you want to leave with the world? 30 seconds. What can you leave? Just something. I mean, you have so much to offer, but what was one thing you talked? Burnout, anxiety, whatever you want.
Oh, you're the master of your destiny. If you want to see it happen, make it happen.
Fair enough. I love that. Well, listen, it has been amazing. I know we went off on a lot of tangents, but I loved it, and that's okay.
I love it.
All right, you do too. Exactly.
This is so fun. Thank you so much.
Oh, it was fun? You had fun? So I've redeemed myself since the pre-interview. Well, listen, it's been amazing. Thank you so much. I've had a great time. We'll do this again. Hopefully we have some drinks at some point. Look forward to seeing you again. For everybody else, folks, stay tuned. There's going to be more from us, obviously, in the future. Please connect with us on all of our platforms, iHeart, Apple, Spotify, and of course YouTube, where you can watch everything and connect with Thrive DX on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks again. It's been a great show. Have a wonderful day. And Bindi, I appreciate you joining us. It's been great.
Thank you. Take care.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Thrive DX, the global leader in cybersecurity training. Now, are you interested in learning more about becoming a cybersecurity professional or how to better secure the future of your organization? Visit thrivedx.com for more details, and make sure you follow us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter, for updates, info, and more. And before we go, I want to thank everyone who helped make this possible. My dynamic executive producer, Michael Seth Prell, our producer and publicist, Carrie Ann Hilton. The design and original music was done by Gilly Fox, Ksenia Aron, and Moro Hana. Our editors, Modi Nahum and Amit Zach. Our advisor, Yoni Neiman, and our manager, Leora Zeri. And the entire operation was overseen by Eugenio Robino Writer at Thrive DX. Thanks to this incredible team. Thanks everyone for joining us. This is Fred Menachem. 0 to 60 and nothing in between. We'll see you in the next episode.